Well, hey, here we are, Acts 17 podcast. I'm with my beautiful, brilliant wife, Tiffany. Hi.
Hi.
What'd you do today?
Well, lots of fun stuff. Always fun with you, babe.
Never a dull moment.
That's right. Never a dull moment.
So this is exciting. We're doing another podcast here for Acts 17 Ministries. And today we're going to really focus on education. Just a quick reminder, we talked about Acts 17 in the past in previous podcasts, and Acts 17 has a lot going on. Like the church is filled with the Holy Spirit. They're on fire. They're being accused of turning the world upside down. And there's a part there where Paul goes to the Areopagus, and of course he's there, and it's the hub of politics. It's the hub of the economic whole business area. Mm-hmm. It's sort of the metropolis. It's where all the activity is, and it's also a place where the philosophers gathered. Mm-hmm. So it's the educational hub as well. So we're going to talk about education and what it means.
Kind of like our house, the hub of philosophy.
Right. Yeah. We try to philosophize. I try to. Sometimes it's
Every
just
day.
We get lost in thoughts.
Yes.
We don't know what thoughts they are, but we just get lost.
Exactly.
So I get lost repeatedly. Anyway, I'm lost now. So I'm back, but we're talking about the importance of bringing Christianity and the Christian worldview, which is the kingdom worldview, into education. So a lot of people might not know that you've spent quite a bit of time formally and informally involved. Of course, informally, you went to school many times in many places.
Most of us have,
but
yes.
You understand public education. You went to 21 different schools?
I did, yes.
By the time you were...
Well, you want me to tell you a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just to start, my love for education, I kind of fell in love with it when I grew up, with a single mom, and everyone always says, well, how'd you go to so many schools? Was it because you were in the military? No, it was because I was raised by a single mom. And when you're kind of in that lifestyle, it was kind of in and out of government housing and trailer parks of Central Florida and, in with a relative and all of the things. So along with that instability came a lot of different schools. And for a kid like me, I never knew that there was a title for it. Growing up, I just thought this is life and everybody else is like this too. And, not having a dad to go to a father-daughter dance or, having friendships that didn't really last a long time. It just felt normal. Like I didn't know anything different. But the one thing that was steady was education. And then now, of course, as I kind of delve into education, I'm finding out that we're called economically disadvantaged. And there's actually a title for it. And it's for kids like me. It's, where a certain percentage of your income is, I think it's under, for a two family household, I think it's under like $40,000 now. I don't know what it was back then. But, so growing up in an environment like that, the one thing that was steady, and of course, my grandparents were always there, and I was beginning to learn a little bit about my faith, but the one thing that was steady was my education. And I knew that it seemed like as hard as I tried to stay in one school or to maintain friendships, it just seems like those things were really hard. But to walk into a new school and excel and do well was easy. And it was fun because it was one thing that I just knew that was always there. I knew that it was something that I could stand out and be proud of what I was doing. So I think in a sense, I probably fell in love with education back then. 21 schools was the amount of schools.
That's incredible.
They were all public schools. I know it does seem kind of weird, right? Looking back, but I mean, there were plenty of years where I think my freshman year, I went to 4 schools. Wow. 2, 3, 4. I think my max was 4 in one year.
So in your case, I mean, we think about the kids now, it's pretty clear that many kids, at least they think they have an identity crisis.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of the new norm, is trying to figure out your identity. But there's a whole different thing. I think we'll maybe have time to go into that. But it seemed like you didn't have an identity crisis. You were going into the public school, I'm sure, for some affirmation that teachers gave you or encouragement for relationships with friends and things like that. But primarily what grounded you from at least at this point, from a secular standpoint in education, because it's public education. Although we could say that there are probably a lot more faith-based things involved then that have been weeded out by the progressive left
Mm-hmm.
now. But you were focused mostly on math, science, reading, and history. I mean, those things sort of been the universal things that got you into a place where you felt like you could succeed in this life, right? So you were going into the classroom or a particular school for the 18th time thinking, oh, I don't know who I am. You knew that if you could grab hold of the basic things of education, that could be the catapult for living the American dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was also a part of looking back. I don't think it was my goal back then, but looking back, I think there was a part of me that was like, well, if I'm good at this, maybe people will notice me. And I think there was a little bit of that in there as well, which is kind of an interesting turn and twist. I guess it comes with growing up like that you want someone to believe in you or someone to pay attention to you. And I think maybe that's where it stemmed from too.
Do you think it was less complicated from an educational standpoint back then? Or am I making this too simple? From what I hear today, they're like all these different things that the education system is trying to push down students' throats or into their minds. But now I'm thinking, looking back, was it really that simple? Was it just reading, math?
That's a really good
English
question.
and science? It seemed like it.
It really, it did. I for me, as us as parents now, back then it was like, here, take your bike. I'll see you for dinner. It was one of those kind of things. No one had any idea what we were doing as kids. I know it was very similar for you. It was like, just come back. No cell phones to call and check in on anybody.
If you had a quarter, you might be able to call.
Right. Okay, if you could find a payphone, you could use it. No electric scooters to get you a couple miles down the road. If you wanted to go somewhere, is walk or ride your bike up and down the hill.
It didn't seem like there was an agenda.
No, it wasn't. But there also, and you might have grown up differently than I did, but there was no one pushing me. There was no parents saying like, did you do your homework?
Right.
You don't understand number 3? Well, let me help you, or let me get you a tutor, or go to after school tutoring. Like those things didn't exist. It definitely seems like it's more challenging now that there's a whole lot of all kinds of stuff coming in, but for sure it was simpler back then. I mean, life in general was simpler back then. Right. So yeah.
But the education system, it seemed like it wasn't full of distractions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And today, I don't think it's just full of distractions. I think it's full of dangerous distractions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the kids now, they're not being taught the basics to get out and get a job, succeed.
Right.
There's like an assault and attack from my standpoint. Of course, I was in education, formally teaching for 7 years, and I see that's even different than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like there is like a concentrated effort to go beyond the basic skills and try to get into almost the souls of the children.
Yeah, I think that's what's happened too, because, from when we were kids, I remember this, and I remember there were very specific things that I remember, but we've been out of it for a while. I mean, we're pushing. We're middle-aged, I guess you could call us. I'm not sure what you define that as, but things have changed. I mean, a lot of things have changed. I mean, we didn't even have cell phones when we were kids. So things have definitely changed. There definitely seems to be something leaking in. And as a parent, I think because of the way I was raised, it was ingrained in me to be everything that I was not when I had a kid. I wanted to be that mom that was like, okay, you need help. How can we help? How can we get you help? How can do you need this? Let me help you with this. Let's get you this. And I'm not saying that's the right thing or the wrong thing, but I was definitely a more hands-on parent than my mom was to me. Now there are good things and bad things. Having a child that you're not hands-on, if you're a single mom and you're busting it, you're working, multiple jobs to pay bills and all the things. Guess what that teaches your child? Independence. And so the one thing that I felt I'm taking away from our kids is when you have two parents in the home, or a parent in a home that seems to really prioritize the maternal life or being a mom role, you're taking away a bit of that independence as well. So, but as far as a parent, it's eye-opening, right? Because my kids, the kids, they stayed. It was ingrained in me. They're not going to change schools. They're just not going to change schools. So they were in the same little teeny private school in Ohio where there were 35 kids per class. I mean, it was very, very small, and it was a lovely school. It was private, but it wasn't Christian. And I felt like it was a lovely school. I have to be honest, I didn't pay much attention to the things they were bringing home. I volunteered in the library. I helped them with their math because I could understand their math back then. Now I can't. And I helped them with their papers, and it all just seemed lovely and fine. But it wasn't until we moved here and we went from these 35 kids per class to our giant public school district where there are 1,400 people per grade that graduated as a senior last year. I mean, that is a huge difference, like a huge difference. Plus, we moved when the kids were teenagers or just, preteens. So we moved then. So it opened up like a whole other place of challenges. And so it was a quick little introduction to public school life. And then it was very eye-opening. It became very eye-opening.
I think that it seems like a lot of people weren't paying attention for years because they just assumed that their children were learning the same things in a similar fashion that they were when they were kids.
Right.
So it really seemed like COVID brought this forth. Because then all the schools closed and all the kids went home and they started getting on their computers. Those who had some, those who didn't have that kind of technology kind of are still left behind.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about this later, but there still are many, many kids that are of that age where they should be reading now very fluently, who are not because of the COVID years. Yeah. But anyways, a lot of parents did get to see and have sort of face-to-face experience of what their child or what their children were learning. Yeah. And it was like, whoa, first of all, this isn't how I learned, and this is not what I learned.
Right. I remember, that's interesting you say that, because it's kind of coming back. I remember during COVID, there was an assignment that came through because parents were forced to sit down and actually see what their kids were learning in school. And I remember there was an assignment that came through, and I can't remember what class it was, probably some sort of English class, but it was song lyrics. I don't remember the assignment. I don't remember anything, but I remember it was song lyrics. And I remember reading them to you. Do you remember this? I remember reading them to you, and I was thinking, why in the world of all the song lyrics to study, like why this one? And I'm not saying, I'll have to go back and see if I can remember, because I remember that was my very first email I sent to the district. Like, why this song? Why these lyrics? What does this have to do? It was one of those kind of questions. It went to the teacher. The teacher gave me a response that was kind of, blah, and it didn't suffice. You know how that goes, right, honey?
Yeah.
And so I ended up sending a letter, and that was my first time, sending a letter to administration, just saying, of all the song lyrics that you could choose for an assignment. And so that kind of opened my eyes. But,
it's so weird. It seems like it seems like there's a strategy or agenda behind some of this.
Well, now as a school board member, I definitely am seeing it. I'm seeing it, all over. And our kids, I'm seeing it from our kids' friends. I'm seeing it from just people that reach out from the community. But the interesting part is it's not coming from, you don't get one woke teacher that's coming in that says, I'm going to just take over this school and I'm going to make every kid here trans. I don't think that's taking place. I don't think that's happening. But I do think that it's slowly slipping in. We had these books that were coming into the classrooms. They were into the libraries. And I'm all about getting age-appropriate learning materials. But let me tell you something about some of these books.
Yeah, I know.
And again, I'm going to fully admit it. I wasn't one to read. We have 6 kids together. I'm not going to read every single one of their books. So that became a hot topic, on the school board, that getting these age-appropriate learning materials, getting that for our children in the libraries and in the classrooms. I've seen the books. they were in there. And
Yeah.
it took I think for the longest time, there are
Terrible.
millions of books
Yeah.
in our libraries. We're a giant district, 74,000 kids, 10,000 employees. They were in there. And I think for the longest time, it was hard to admit, it's hard to keep track of all these books. But then parents started waking up. Then we're having, parents speaking up at school board meetings. Biden, and the thing that happened with Governor Youngkin, calling it a national terrorist threat. And it kind of just woke parents up, and it started this movement of people really starting to pay attention. And it might have been a COVID 2020 kind of thing where parents just opened their eyes to what was going on, but people started seeing it. They started seeing the transgenderism and the gender dysphoria kind of growing at an exponential rate. And parents just started waking up. And I think that's really when the opportunity to run and be a part of the school board. We're the 9th largest district in the state of Texas. I remember in the summer of 2022 is when the opportunity came about. And I had been thinking about, getting involved in local politics just to make a difference for a while. And I remember that the opportunity came up, and I saw that it was available, and I kept praying about it and thinking, like, God doesn't want this for me. I would be terrible at this. Like, this isn't my background. I'm not a politician, all of these things. And I'm like, God's not wanting me to do this. And they just kept praying about it and praying about it. And don't ever say no to God, because
that doesn't go well.
And you're like, fine.
Ask Jonah.
Right. Exactly. So I can't, how many times I was like, I'm not doing this. This isn't for me. I'm not doing this. But I accepted, and I ran and for such a time as this. And it has been an interesting ride thus far.
I still just think back on trying to think of the differences and how it got to be what it is today so fast. Well, first of all, we know that it was the late 60s or something, and they took prayer out of the school. And I mean, that should be a red flag to the church always. When people start saying you shouldn't pray in some sort of any arena, but particular public arena, that's never going to be good. Of course, then there's definitely a shift in discipline. I mean, even when I was teaching 15, 20 years ago, from when I was in school, it's not the lack of discipline. It's just that parents and teachers and administrators don't have the same sort of influence that they did when we were kids.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because how many years did you teach in public schools?
7 years.
7 years, right? So that just shows the impact that a teacher can have on a child's life. These are the formative years. I've been with you in a very public arena at James's football game. We were out in Katy or something. And this is how many years ago? Did you teach 20 some years ago?
The guy we saw, I probably hadn't seen in 15 years.
15 years. And a kid from a far away at a football stadium in Katy, which is like 30 miles from here. Mr. Nelson, is that you, Mr. Nelson? And it just shows the impact that a teacher can have on a student. And I was just so blown away and so touched by that. I don't know if you were, but I was like, I got very emotional about that.
And let me be clear that if there are issues in the education system, and it's not because of teachers. The overwhelming majority of teachers are good teachers.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, you could say the same with bus drivers and administration and maybe not school boards so much, but overall, the majority of people want what's best for the children.
Education is hard.
It is definitely. You have to be all things to all people.
People aren't becoming teachers because they want to become millionaires. And that just, it just goes to show that the reward, there's treasures in heaven.
You have to like learning, actually. To be a teacher, you have to like learning, not just like teaching. You have to love being saturated with knowledge.
It's a calling.
Yeah.
For sure.
I do think that though on the periphery, you always get the nuts. You always get the crazies. But the more I look at the whole educational system, the more I think it really, what seemed to be counter common sense, particularly counter Christian, started in the collegiate university level education. For whatever reason, that's just where you get the most radicalized and the most ridiculous ideas. And I think that they're to blame. I think those universities, and they like to push the periphery. They like to be open to being an Areopagus of their own, and have a school of thought, and anything's fair game. I mean, I went to a seminary, a Christian seminary, at a university, and I had I was going to say a Christian professor, but he wasn't a Christian professor. I had a professor at a by name Christian university who told me that this wasn't a seminary but a school of theology, and that basically everything was fair game. That you could or you should believe in God if you want to, but you didn't have to.
Wow, in seminary.
So he said it's not a seminary; it's a school of theology. My point is that in the education system, no matter what school you're in, whether you're in the social sciences like psychology, sociology, or humanities like history, or you're in the medical sciences, or your math, or your theology, it seems like over the last, since the beginning of academia, it seems like those are the places where anything is fair game in thought.
Yep.
And I had a evangelist that was really impactful in my life. He came through preaching several times, and he had a phrase that really just grabbed a hold of me, and I said it. No, Billy's a professor, but he's brilliant too. Yeah. But I had a evangelist preacher who said, when the unthinkable becomes the thinkable becomes a talkable, and the talkable becomes a doable. And the universities, I think that the unthinkable in thought sort of emerged, and people began to talk about that. Yeah. So the unthinkable emerged. They begin to think about it, then they begin to talk about it, and they begin to do that. I think that's where ideas like Marxism. Yeah. I know Marxists didn't really develop his ideas, which are just, we could talk about a different episode, which are basically, I think, diabolical at the core. He didn't necessarily develop them in the university setting, but they actually latched on to professors in a university setting. And I think that is the root of what we're experiencing now. Again, we'll say that for a different episode, but I think the blame is at that collegiate university level. And so if you're training people to train people to teach people, then what you're training them at the very beginning, I guess it would be upstream, right, will be so important, because when you get to downstream, which is where our children are, then whatever they're being taught by their teacher's teacher is going to come out. And I think that river has gotten spoiled. It's gotten rotten. Yeah. Did you read that in the Communist Manifesto book that I saw on the nightstand? Is that your light reading that you're doing? Oh, they talk about the downstream. Light reading. Yeah, I am reading the Communist Manifesto because I like learning. Also, I like learning what the strategy is for people I think that are sort of the opposite, which I would have to debate. In this case, as a Christian believer, I think it's important to know what's out there that's counter Christianity. Yeah, which is a counter to kingdom. Absolutely. So I just think it's really cute. If I want to turn the world upside down, right? Yes. If I want to turn the world upside down, I want to know exactly not just who needs to be turned upside down for Jesus Christ, but what ways of thinking and speaking and teaching and behaving need to be turned upside down as well. Yep. So I think that the blame is at that level. There are a lot of good teachers, there are a lot of good administrators and paraprofessionals, all that. But I think it's time for us to pinpoint what thoughts are dangerous to not just the well-being of society, but the well-being of individuals, particularly our children. Well, I think one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with, or I think society as a whole, is tolerance. Yeah. I think parents are more and more disconnected now than they've ever been, besides us, obviously. Right. But I think there's a disconnect. Kids are, attached to their phones. They're going in their room, closing the door, and getting on their phones or their computers or their gaming system, and they're going there for hours and hours and hours, and who knows what's going on inside there in their heads. And then they go into the classrooms, and they go into the schools, and they might meet a friend there that who's also going through something similar, and they decide to talk about experimenting, and then it just goes on and on and on and on. So I think tolerance
is definitely something that's different than that we're experiencing now. And I think that's leading into a lot of other things. I mean, sure, when I read books when I was a kid, and if I thought I wanted to be a pirate, that didn't mean I was going to go and chop off my leg. Or, I mean, I was the biggest tomboy ever, but I certainly didn't want to be a boy. But for some reason, that's a huge issue that we have. I mean, the level of the percentages of kids that have gender dysphoria are like off the charts. It's like, and then the suicide rates of children that have gender dysphoria are just crazy ridiculous. So that's certainly something.
A couple points that you brought up that I want to talk about. I want to get to suicide secondly, but the first one is this isolation, isolation bit, because I think it's dangerous on at least two fronts. First, because of technology, you're isolated alone a lot of times. We'll get to the gaming and the interaction with other friends online, but first in just a moment. But I think that you're isolated alone. So there's a tendency to be able to get on social media or search the web and it'll just be you and whatever you're searching and God. And sometimes people, in this case, kids, don't realize that God's watching, but God's always watching.
That's right.
But a lot of times it's just the boy or the girl and technology, and they become isolated. So they could have 5,000 followers on Instagram or however they have a Snap or whatever they're doing. I know they're not really on Facebook, but the saying is you could have 5,000 friends on Facebook and not really have a good friend. So there's an isolation component that exists now that didn't exist then. But secondly, when it comes to engaging friends in isolation, which is what a lot of kids and even ours, they justify not hanging out with their friends outside because they're hanging with their friends inside by doing video games together. But there is a danger in that as well, not just because they're not having physical activity, they're not out socializing and learning to pick up social cues, but also when you're engaged in dialogue behind closed doors with other people or friends behind closed doors, then you've lost a space of accountability to flesh out your ideas. So before, back in the day, if you wanted to talk with your friends, unless you went off to the corner of society or went to a playground and had a little conversation alone, most of your conversations were in settings where there was some level of accountability. I mean, you just couldn't talk about anything.
That's right.
You couldn't plan suicides or plan, like we're seeing today, mass shootings among people in school because of isolationism and a lot of other reasons. But what I'm saying is you before social media, you had to converse basically in people's homes or in public places like schools.
Or on a rotary phone with one of those long cords.
But you still then,
twisted.
But most of the time the conversations were sort of, you have these chat rooms
Oh,
where you could go to, you actually in these chat rooms, you can troll to the depths of hell, right? So now you have isolation, dangerous in two fronts with our children.
And predators
no accountability, either alone or no accountability in discussions or dialogues with other friends.
And then you have parents that are giving kids phones at very young ages and don't know that there are parental controls on their phones. That you can actually go in, and I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't give your child a phone and what age you should. I'm not, that's not my jam, but you can put parental controls on your phone and locks so that you can only see things that are that doesn't block out everything. But a lot of parents don't even know that. They're like, here you go, here's your phone.
So there are a lot of dangers of obviously there are a lot of good things, but there are a lot of dangers of technology. And I mean, you can be addicted to technology. You can be addicted to certain things on technology, not just to technology itself. You could be isolated. You get isolated.
Things like pornography, which lights up your brain like cocaine. I mean, it's so awful for a child, especially in the formative years.
So it's way different. I mean, it's so much more complex than it's ever been. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to when it comes to education, it seems like our children are becoming more isolated and disconnected because of technology, but also there's this unexplored, I guess, negative component in my mind where you don't know how to have appropriate public discourse and conversation.
And
then regarding suicide, I wanted to come back to that because I know that when we do mention in different public places about these books and they're being dangerous, and then the opposition will say, "Oh no, but they're like a counselor. They're identifying with the child, and they're trying to be empathetic, and that might be the only way a child has a friend or connection through this book. I'm not buying it, because these books are not like that. They're not identifying. They're not. I know Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, has a suicide scene in there with Romeo and Juliet, both dying because of love, right?
Right.
But that is entirely different than these books that now
They're
not
how
just
to.
they don't just condone it; they instruct you how to.
Yeah.
That is, one is a tragedy that should be discussed in class as a historical work of fiction, and it's a tragic ending that should be avoided at all costs. And if you were to teach that, you should be, how do we stop this from ever happening? To now we actually have books that say suicide isn't just a thing, but here's how to do it if you're at it's mind-bogglingly disturbing.
Yeah.
And so that's where we are. We're at Romeo and Juliet from the past to now. That's not a good enough classic to read and talk about the problem of suicide. Now we've got to have a book that both identifies it and then it tells you how to actually succeed.
Yeah.
That is completely different.
So one of the things that we were able to do in my first 2 years on the school board was rewrite a book policy. We had some legislation, as you know, HB 900 was finally passed, and it removes sexually explicit materials. I know this isn't suicide, but it's leading into what you're talking about.
It's content.
Yeah. And so it included sexually explicit materials. It took us 3 times to get that book policy. We had a book policy. I know. We had a book policy in place, but it was very vague. It didn't remove that specific language, was not written in the policy. So not much was removed at all. And parents were just showing up, school board meeting, reading excerpts from books. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe.
And most of the time, like I said, you were disturbing the peace, so you were violating laws simply by reading them in a public arena, and yet the kids could go read them in the library.
Was the reaction of the folks that were sitting in the room. They're like, there are children in here. And we're like, exactly.
I know.
Exactly. So it took us 3 times to get this policy passed to include, to align with HB 900. And thankfully we had the legislation to back it up, because it was very hard to get any sort of policy in place. So having that in place it made it a lot easier for us to rewrite the policy. Again, it took us 3 times. This is a 7-member board, and we needed a majority, which is 4. And it was a 3-4 every single time. So we finally got it. I put it on the agenda for the 3rd time, and I included the sexually explicit language. I think for the first few times it was like, this isn't happening in our school. This isn't taking place, and we don't want it to take place, but you can't unsee the things that these kids have seen. Yeah. I would get emails from parents, emails from kids. I would have kids come and meet me, come and see me, showing me what they found. So it did exist. Yeah. So finally, thank the Lord, we did get that policy in place. And as you know, it was very, very chaotic. There was a lot of opposition that came with us 3 being on the board, and the other 4 that were there but I do feel like, as many arrows that were coming at us and attacking us and name calling and the videoing and the paper, the Chronicle would write stories about us and say negative things about the mama bears and call us white Christian nationalists and accuse us of every single thing that you could ever possibly imagine. It was weird because it didn't hurt. It was like, I'm armored up, right? Yeah. I'm totally armored up. Yeah. I mean, it was like the 3 of us were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But then we had a 4th man in the fire because we were always, it was like, what, boom, boom, pop, pop, pop. Like it was just constantly coming at us. And I would come home after a 5, 6, 7 hour board meeting sometimes, and I would be like rattled a little bit, but that was it.
Protecting our kids and protecting their minds.
Because it's so much bigger than me. It's so much bigger than our kids. It's everybody.
And I'm so tired of the book banning term. I
know.
If there's anyone like in the room from the times I've been in the board meeting, if there's anyone in the room who appreciates books, I think I'd be on one of the top 5 in the room.
Yeah.
I'm an avid reader.
If you have Communist Manifesto on your
thousands
nightstand,
of books. I'm not for book banning, but I am for making sure that
It's age appropriate.
children are the right age to handle the content.
Yeah.
And
banning means it's no longer available. Go to your library, or go to Barnes and Noble, or go to Amazon and purchase the book if that's what you're wanting to give to your child.
I've read,
and some of them have been removed from the classroom collections, but they're still available in the library. So some of the books that aren't as bad, that they're either being removed, or they're just being removed from the assignments from the classroom collection.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some rated R movies that if we knew they were being shown in first grade during free time,
that's right,
before the holidays,
so you can't.
somebody would be like, well, no, it's got sexuality in it, it's got language, it's got too much violence, but it's not okay to rate the books.
Right.
I mean, that to me, that's one of the things where actually culture is actually sort of oxymoronic. I mean,
I agree.
That's not the right word I'm looking for. They're basically hypocritical themselves by saying it's okay
you can't see a rated R movie, you can't get a Playboy magazine, you can't buy cigarettes or alcohol,
but it's okay to read it.
Yeah.
Although we'll put images in the book as long as it's drawn by pencil.
And you've seen them with your very own eyes.
It's ridiculous. So we're interested, going back to Acts 17 Ministries. We're interested in the education of our children of all ages, actually, and through college. I mean, we have 2 children in college now. I'm still interested in what they're learning in college, even though they're adults now, and I believe they can fully handle anything that comes their way. They should fully handle. They should be able to evaluate them. They have the compass within them that God planted innately within them. They should know the difference between right and wrong, and they should be held accountable, and they should seek things of accountability. But I'm very concerned of making sure that we turn lives upside down for Christ, especially those lives are already either face down, which are the wrong way, and turn them right side up, which is the kingdom, which is the side that the kingdom of God wants you to be. So we want to make sure that solid kingdom valued thinking infiltrates every part of reality.
And that's one of the things that we're able to do as school board members. So we are the ultimate authority of our school board, which is crazy to think. But one of the coolest things that has been part of my journey, and I give all the glory to God on this. I don't take any credit at all, but when there's an issue with books, we had a gentleman who has a doctorate of astrophysics from MIT or something, way smarter than I could ever dream of, brought it to the board in a level 3 hearing. And he said, it was a biology textbook, and it talked about the Big Bang Theory. And he said that that belonged in history, in the study of world religion, because the Big Bang Theory is the study of atheism. And
the affirms atheism, which is secular humanism.
Correct. And so he wanted to get it removed from the science books and put it into history books in the study of world religion. And everyone was like, whoa, wait a minute. Can we do that? Well, what about the teaks and, all of these things? And will we be able
to?
And it
would mess with the teaks.
Yes. And will we be able to satisfy requirements of graduation and all this stuff? And what we did discover, we do have the ultimate authority, but when it comes to the teaks, we don't. Yeah. So we can't remove the things that you have to satisfy. But what we could do at that time was, and I, with my background as a pastor's wife and a master's in Christian ministry and a science nerd, we could then introduce in the supplemental materials the intelligent design. To have critical thinking, because we all know about the Big Bang Theory. It's a theory.
Well, also, doesn't the text say compare and contrast, something like that, the origins of the universe?
Yes.
So the origins of the universe, in theory, would include evolution, because it's not a fact, it's a theory, but any other theory in how the universe came about, which is intelligent design.
Compare and
so you took the
theories,
text, which
plural.
is brilliant, babe. You took the text. You're like, well, we can't change it. We can't move it over there, but it says compare and contrast. And actually, it was comparing and contrasting.
Theories, plural,
it was comparing and contrasting theories. The issue was it was comparing different evolutionary theories.
Correct.
Which actually is a violation of of the First Amendment, because it established the religion of secular humanism, which the Supreme Court in 1969 called a religion.
Yes.
So, but no one said anything about that.
Right.
So this was brilliant on your part.
Well, I don't know about brilliant. It's all God. But he brought it to the board and suggested this. It came to a vote and everybody voted no. But shocking. I don't even think it mattered at that point because you can't change the TEKS. And so I said, well, I have an idea. How about, we introduce the supplemental materials and intelligent design, and it failed.
Right.
And it hurts. Like I felt like it was heavy on my heart. I wasn't sleeping and I kept researching it and all the things. And as you know, as my husband, I don't like to be told no.
I don't tell you no.
So I decided that I felt like it was important. Like I really wanted our students to know that intelligent design is also perhaps an alternative to think critically as to the origin of the universe. Because a lot of times some of these kids don't even know that.
Yeah, they wouldn't have known that had they not seen it.
The Big Bang Theory has just been what people have taught. But every 7 years, the curriculum gets rewritten. Yep. And so I was aware that the science curriculum was going to be rewritten. So I reached out to the State Board of Education and just had a lot of conversations with one of the State Board of Education members, just really deep, in-depth conversations.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. She's a rock star.
Yes, she is.
A rock star for the kingdom.
Yes.
And for common sense.
Exactly. And so, we talked about it. You were helpful with it.
We took a road trip.
We've been out to Austin plenty of times and just really watched it unfold. Yep. And we had some, professionals come in and talk about, were they getting it big time in their public comment, big time. She was getting death threats and all the things. But in the end, they had a new proclamation that came out and we were there and it was amazing to be there and watch it pass. But they, not only did they add intelligent design to the curriculum, but they removed monkey evolution and any anti-American and pro-China language that takes place in any of the textbooks, which was incredible for us and me to watch unfold, because not only did the students of Conroe ISD, our district, get to have intelligent design to compare and contrast as the origin of the universe with the Big Bang Theory, now students in the entire state of Texas get to have this. It's just a small little bit. And the interesting part...
That's how you turn the world upside down.
But the interesting part about being a school board member, that's our job, right? One of our main jobs, we set the tax rate and we do all these important things, but we also approve curriculum. We spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on curriculum. So why should we raise our hand to vote on curriculum? Yes, we have a team and they're lovely and they're wonderful people. We have a team that goes through it and combs through it and says, these are the ones that we recommend. Here they are. Guess what? It's our job to read that curriculum. And it wasn't because God laid it out so perfectly. But if he hadn't, I was aware of the proclamation. I knew every little bit, every little nook and cranny that took place from that proclamation, because I'd worked on it for so long, and I knew what to look for. So when the recommendations came to us, here I am going through these, and you know how it's you're reading Communist Manifesto, I'm reading 8th grade biology textbooks, but I'm like, wait a minute. Here's the Big Bang Theory, but there's no intelligent design. So then it wasn't over. No. After I'd worked on this for a year, babe, after it still wasn't over.
I know.
The day of the meeting, our meeting was at 6 p.m., 4 o'clock, I'm on the phone with the publishers.
They tried to slip it in.
I'm telling our curriculum person, I'm like, whoa, because she knew I had been working on it. And I said, it's not in here. And she said, okay, well, let's call. So she gets them on the phone. I'm on the phone. 4 o'clock, I'm driving to the meeting. I'm on the phone with them. You have my word. I'm going to put it in writing that we're going to change it. We're going to add it digitally. We didn't get it added by the time that this round of edits had come out, but it's going to be in the new exit. You have my word, blah, blah, blah. So after all that, we were able to get it in and get it. And then we were able to get a couple chapters taken out that they also left out, this particular publisher, and made it happen. But not only Conroe ISD, but the entire state of Texas. And apparently, how whatever the state of Texas does, the rest of the nation follows suit. So hopefully, I know of some other states that have picked up that proclamation language as well. So it's just little things that we can do that we have to watch over.
And this is Acts 17. I mean, not only is that helping turn the world upside down, but basically just like Paul, you in a way went to an Areopagus, a center of a hub for, in this case, education, and you pointed out harmful, negative thinking and inserted thinking that would align with the values of the kingdom. And that's what Acts 17 is about. It's about taking kingdom-minded people, empowering them with well, God empowers us, but empowering them with the tools and resources and the knowledge of the Bible, and sending them out to make a difference, to turn this world upside down.
It's the right thing to do. And that's what the voters entrusted me to do. They asked me to do these things, and it's what we're there to do. You know, a large percent of the population or of our county and our district voted me in, and I take that, you know, very seriously. And it's a real honor to be able to represent. And these are the things that are important to me and to the voters that put me in. So I'll continue to work hard. I have 2 more years left on my term, so I'll continue to work hard and turn the world upside down.
That's right. Well, we could talk about education forever, and we're going to do it again in another episode, I'm sure. But that's our time for now. So thanks, babe, for joining me and us, and it was fun. We'll do it again soon.
All right.
Love you.
Love you.